Hello, my name is Debbie Wirtz. I am the Program Director for Novi Community Coalition in Novi, Michigan. I'm also a Michigan ACE Community Champion. Today I'm going to be briefly talking about what is Adverse Childhood Experiences, or commonly known as ACEs. From the very first spark of life, our experiences with the world around us has a profound impact on who we are and who we will become. Although we can recall and describe with words much of what has happened in our lives, the memory of human experience is stored in our bodies and not just in our minds. Remember the saying that they're too young to remember? Well, that's not really true. People frequently marvel at the resilience of children. Sure, children will recover from skinned knees or a tumble, but childhood trauma can have lifelong consequences. The Centers of Disease Control and Prevention and Kaiser Permanente conducted a study comprising of over 17,000 middle-class adults. The study examined the impact of adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, on physical health and social functioning. They also examined the relationship between ACEs and adult health risk-taking behaviors. Participants were instructed to check the categories that reflected their negative childhood experiences. Each category equaled 1 point, and based on the number of categories that were checked, the participant could receive a score ranging from 0 to 10. The study results showed that adverse childhood experiences are very common, and 2/3 of the participants had an ACE score of 2 or more, and 1 in 6 had an ACE score of 4 or more. The study revealed that high ACE score in the first 18 years of life are linked to poor outcomes in physical and mental health and social functioning. The study found that an ACE score of 6 or more decreased one's life expectancy by 20 years compared to those participants with an ACE score of 0. ACEs are stressful or traumatic events, including abuse and neglect, household dysfunction, environmental, and social conditions. ACEs are strongly related to our development and have a wide range of health problems throughout a person's lifespan. When children are exposed to chronic stressful events, their neurodevelopment can be disrupted. As a result, the child's cognitive functioning and/or ability to cope with negative or disruptive emotions may be impaired. Over time, often during adolescence, the child may adopt unhealthy coping mechanisms. Eventually, these coping skills can contribute to disease, disability, and social problems. Trauma is one possible outcome of exposure to adversity. Trauma occurs when a person perceives an event or set of circumstances as extremely frightening, harmful, or threatening, either emotionally, physically, or both. With trauma, a child's experience of strong negative emotions, such as terror or helplessness, and psychological symptoms such as rapid heartbeat or stomach ache may develop soon afterward and continue well beyond the initial exposure. Certain types of childhood adversities are especially likely to cause trauma reactions in children, such as the loss of a family member, a natural disaster, or a serious car accident. Other childhood adversities, such as parental separation or divorce, tend to be associated with more varied factors in children's reactions and may or may not be experienced by a child as trauma. Childhood trauma is associated with problems across multiple domains of development. However, trauma affects each child differently depending on his or her individual, family, and environmental risk and protective factors. For example, two children who experience the same type of adversity may respond in different ways. One may recover quickly without significant distress, whereas the other will develop more lasting adverse effects. The point here is, though, even though you might have experienced trauma or adverse experiences, everyone responds differently, and it depends on the type of environment and support that you have. The science of epigenetics tells us that the ability of our cells to read the messages on our genes is influenced by our experiences. Scientists have discovered that responses to stress may be passed from one generation to the next. In one study, scientists conditioned rats to be afraid of the smell of cherry blossoms. When the cherry blossom odor came into the rat's environment, they began to huddle and were stunned with fear until the odor was removed. These rats had pups who grew up without any exposure to cherry blossoms. This generation of new pups were separated from their parents and placed into a different environment. When the smell of cherry blossoms was put into that environment, the pups became jumpy. They had a heightened sensitivity to the smell of cherry blossoms. The field of epigenetics may help us understand how groups of people may be deeply affected by historical trauma despite current efforts to care for one another. Some of these inherited genes can be good for the help of survival, but some can be negative for our mental health and cause more stress. Stress is the body's reaction to situations, things, and situations that occur within and outside the body. Stress can be helpful and has been hardwired into our body for survival. For example, imagine you're hiking in the forest and you're confronted with a bear. The body's natural fight or flight response results in adrenaline and cortisol being pumped into your bloodstream to help you fight harder and run faster until that threat is removed. The body's stress response is beneficial to help you survive this potentially life-threatening encounter. However, this stress response is only appropriate and useful if you're actually in the woods with a bear. The problem occurs if that bear comes home with you every night. For example, if you're a 5-year-old whose single working mother is struggling with alcoholism. The child experiences stress day after day, and that becomes toxic stress. Stress goes from being helpful and life-saving to unhelpful and life-damaging. Children are especially vulnerable to this repeated stress activation as their brains and bodies are in critical and sensitive periods of development. Stress can be subdivided into different categories. There's positive stress, tolerable stress, and toxic stress. A positive stress response is normal and essential part of healthy development. Positive stress is characterized by brief increases in heart rate and hormone levels. Examples of positive stress include the first day of school, first piano recital, a test. And that stress helps motivate you to prepare more and try harder. Tolerable stress response activates the body's alert system to a little bit greater degree. Examples of tolerable stress include a frightening car accident or being admitted to the hospital. If the activation is time limited and buffered by relationships with adults who help that child adapt, the brain and other organs recover from what might otherwise be damaging effects. Now, toxic stress response can occur when a child experiences strong, frequent, and/or prolonged adversity, which results in changes to their baseline state. Examples of toxic stress include physical or emotional abuse, chronic neglect, caregiver substance abuse, mental illness, exposure to violence, and/or the accumulation burdens of family economic hardship. This prolonged activation of the stress response system can disrupt the development of the brain architecture and other organ systems and increase the risk for stress-related disease and cognitive impairment well into the adult years. The presence of social emotional buffering, such as healthy relationship support from adult, determines whether the resulting stress response will be tolerable or toxic. Both animal and human studies show that long-term elevations in cortisol levels can alter the function of a number of neural systems, suppress the immune response, and even change the architecture of the regions in the brain that are essential for learning and memory. Chronic levels of high cortisol can damage the hippocampus and prefrontal cortex, which then cause impairment with your working memory and decision making and impair sustained attention. Toxic stress weakens the architecture of the developing brain, which can lead to lifelong problems in learning, behavior, and both physical and mental health. When a child experiences toxic stress, the hormone release system is overactivated. This results in blood levels of the stress hormone cortisol being higher, which can result in long-term changes to the brain makeup. The results of developmental trauma can be devastating for children. Children with developmental trauma disorder typically have symptoms of PTSD. In addition, they often struggle with mood regulation, anger, aggression, self-injury, and an unhealthy need for control. Furthermore, changes in the brain affect their development and their ability to trust other adults. As you can see here, the difference between a healthy brain and a brain that has gone through a lot of toxic stress. Children who are raised in traumatic homes know it even before they are born. The mother's stress hormones cross the placenta into the baby. You've probably heard the old wise tale about colicky babies and difficult pregnancy. A colicky baby means the mother was extremely nervous during the pregnancy. Well, there's a lot of truth, even more than people realize. Once the child is born, it overproduces the stress hormones for itself. If any of your relatives ever described you as a difficult baby who cried a lot or couldn't sleep, chances are your mother was experiencing trauma or stress during the pregnancy. As you can see here, the correlation between ACEs and depression. The more adverse experiences or the more ACEs that you have, the more likely you are to experience depression. ACE scores are linked to both physical and mental health problems, such as if you have 4 or more ACEs, you are 6 times more likely to be depressed. In 2016, 44% of Michigan adults with 4 or more ACEs had been diagnosed with depression, compared to only 12% of Michigan adults with no ACEs. Again, this was back in 2016, so imagine the numbers now since the pandemic. But you know what? There is hope. There are things we can do to lessen the effects of these negative experiences. Even though a person has an ACE, there are things that can be done to build in resilience and protect them. We know that there are 3 protective systems that are needed. People do best when they are living in thriving families and communities. We can help one another to develop personal attributes that help us weather life's storms. Promoting our capabilities, attachment, and belonging, along with community, culture, and spirituality, all have positive effects that can reduce the effects of ACEs. Being aware of this information can help you better understand maybe yourself and the stress you have gone through, and also understand others and what has happened to them. Keep in mind that we don't have to get a score of 0. Bringing down the scores any amount will have a huge effect. But also keep in mind, you don't always know everyone's story. So that's why we need to show compassion, help each other, and be supportive and understanding each other. People don't go walking around talking about their ACE scores or their traumatic experiences. But now that you can understand that having those experiences are very common and they do affect your mental well-being. So be supportive of each other and understanding of each other. Our action to prevent ACEs, whether large or small, can profoundly improve our future and the future of others. Thank you for attending, and I hope you have a great day.